Hi, hi. I'm Brad Siegel. This is my IB English IOC or individual oral commentary. I'm looking at "I Have a Dream" by Martin Luther King. It was spoken at the Lincoln Memorial on August 28th, 1963. The purpose is to tell his audience of his vision of the future as one nation rather than of divided one. And he's speaking towards mainly activists, people who were at the March on Washington on this August day. So he starts in the beginning. I divided this into 5 sections. The first section is lines 1 to 4. It's him sort of setting the scene. We'll see during the third paragraph. We'll see he starts his dream. That doesn't really connect as much to the next "I Have a Dream" parts, but I'll get to that. So he starts today. I say to you today, my friends. He connects his entire audience just right from the very beginning. He's making them feel as sort of a brotherhood, or that everyone's friends and everyone's together. So early on, he's already trying to nail in his main idea and the main idea of the civil rights movement and why they're there on this day. He goes on in line 2. He says, "It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream." So this connects towards a larger audience, not just the people at the speech, because all the people at the speech are activists, but people who are listening to this speech or read the speech after, almost everyone is familiar or has their own American dream. So if they can connect their dream to what the activist dreams are and what Martin Luther King's dream is, then they can believe and start to agree with what he's saying. In line 4, he says in quotes, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." End quote. He connects through history. He starts to establish his ethos of being knowledgeable. It also adds logos to his argument because he's showing how people are equal, and from directly quoting the evidence, from directly quoting the Declaration of Independence, he makes it appear as logical that they should have the same rights because almost everyone believes in the Declaration of Independence, and that we should break away from England. So if it's the same, then why shouldn't it be the same now with the African Americans and their movement? So that's the end of the first subject. And the second subject starts on line 5, and that goes all the way to line 20. And that's his dream, his vision of the future. So he starts off, he goes, it says, "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down at a table of brotherhood." So first he says red hills. He could have just said the hills of Georgia, but he said the red hills. So not only does it create imagery, it's important that he said red hills because it almost symbolizes blood and hate. Everything that they've gone through with slavery. Georgia was obviously one of the worst places in slavery. It was segregated. So red, most people would connect with a negative color. When you think of, like, say, red versus blue, you think like, oh, the red team is the villain or the bad people. So he's showing just by this one word red how bad Georgia has been in the past. And then he also goes on to prove it by saying the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners. So he proves that last thing by saying there was obviously a lot of slave owners in Georgia. This again connects to his larger audience of the slave owners, because they're probably not the ones being the activists or the former slave owners, the sons of former slave owners. They're probably not the ones being activists. They're probably the one that are pushing for segregation. So if he could connect to them, it could strengthen his position in the United States. Then at the end he says the table of brotherhood. So table is a symbol for togetherness, or obviously brotherhood because he says table of brotherhood. And he wants to show that if we can all sit at this figurative table, then we can all be equal. So say, like, if we could all be together and not argue and just enjoy, say, dinner together at this table, then it shows how far we've come since the days of slavery and obviously the bad things that had happened in Georgia. On line 7, he says, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. So he personifies the injustice and oppression to show how bad it really is. I mean, his diction of sweltering, it can compare to oasis, because it goes, sweltering is kind of like you're kind of uncomfortable. Like if there's a sweltering heat, it's like you feel sticky and gross. But oasis, it just seems like an infinite land of just happiness and joy and obviously freedom and justice, which he wants. On lines 10 and 11, he talks about his 4 little children, and this is pathos, because he gets his kids involved, and he kind of plays a sympathy card, like all these kids are having to grow up in this horrible time for African American people. So he wants them not to be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, meaning that if they're a good person, he wants them to be judged as a good person, not as a African American person. And this also connects to the letter from Birmingham jail that we also looked at, because he mentions how he has a 5-year-old daughter who is unconsciously becoming, or getting an unconscious hate towards white people just because they're segregated and they're just seemingly naturally born opposites, even though they're really not. So then he says, I have a dream today. It shows how it's a pressing issue, and it needs to be fixed quickly. And that also changes from him. He kept saying one day, and then he says one day right below this before saying, I have a dream today. So he's showing how one day he wants this to happen, but then he says, I have a dream today, meaning he wants it to happen now. And he kind of just set up this sentence up until now. And obviously textually, it's just a one-sentence paragraph of 5 words. So it's very effective, and you pause and you really look at it and notice that he says today. He goes on, he says at the end of line 14 to 15, he goes, with its governor, 13 to 14, sorry. With its governor having lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. So he personifies the lips, that they're dripping, even though obviously lips are alive, but he still personifies them, dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. Those words mean like to come between or not allowed. So it shows how the white people are treating them, and it's sort of evidence of the discrimination that they're facing up to this point, and sort of why they're walking. On line 16 at the end, to end this sentence, he says, sisters and brothers. So this can relate to line 1 where I talked about my friends. I mean, it makes them all equal to show how there's no difference. And also just it sort of connects religiously, because religiously they preach that everyone comes from God and everyone is sisters and brothers. So that can also help connect to that broader audience and realize they actually are the same as us. And then in line 17, he repeats, I have a dream today. So this is important, the repetition of this sentence, because it keeps the audience engaged, and also has a dramatic effect. So even though it is a speech, we're just reading it, but you could tell the tone of his voice goes from speaking loudly, and then he just grandly says, I have a dream today. And that obviously can get the crowd very riled up and believing in what he's saying. So then, this is his last I have a dream sentence. At the end, he says, the glory of God shall be revealed. This, I kind of alluded to this earlier. This connects to the church, where most people also connect to. So many people go to church. So if he could connect to that church audience and show I go to church too, I do the same things as you, then maybe they can see the similarities between them and look past the racial aspect of it. So in this next subject, it's from lines 21 to 25. This is just sort of the faith. He has another people. and I took the word faith because he says it so many times. So he repeats it so many times, and he leaves it up to the audience to do good. I mean, so he's sort of calling on them, that he has faith in them, to start figuring it out. In line 22, he says, hew out the mountain of despair, a stone of hope, and that means just cut. Hew means cut, out of the mountain of despair. So he's saying that even just a little piece, a stone of hope, will help to, sorry, will help the efforts that they're having. And so on line 23, he says jangling discords, and obviously what I just said, hew, it furthers its ethos because it makes his diction stronger. So the audience knows, oh, this is an educated man. He's a good speaker. On line 24 and 25, it's repetition. What we will, to go. This is parallel structure, meaning that he's listing all these things, and the effect it has on the audience is that they sort of start believing, and he's likely speaking quickly, and they're just kind of getting riled up and getting into his speech and his message. And also, I thought to go to jail, I thought that was important. Because it shows that how through the bad time and the good, through thick and thin, they could still stick together, and be one and together, as one. So on line 26, this is him repeating "Let freedom ring." Shows where and what they're gonna do. This is up until line 37. On line 26, he says, "When all of God's children," again, this connects to what they said earlier, with the God, and it's them sort of connecting. Then he goes on, in the sentence, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing." And then land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. This is another historical or American reference. He's showing how he's a true American, and how some of the white people, or he's the same as the white people, in every aspect except for race, he's a true American. So then he starts talking about where he wants "Let freedom to ring." So he uses parallel structure, by saying "Let freedom ring," and he just lists all these different places, and it keeps the audience going the whole time throughout the speech. It connects to everyone in America, not just to segregated areas, even though he does emphasize, but not only that, "Let freedom ring" in the mountain of Georgia. And I think he does that just to show how truly bad it is. And he already alluded to Georgia with the Red Hills earlier, like I talked about. So that's why he says, but not only that. And then that sort of ends on line 37, and the rest is just his conclusion in the final paragraph, where he repeats every, in the first sentence. Well, actually, it's only one sentence, but he repeats every in the first two lines 4 times. It shows that everyone's equal or feels together. He sort of hones in on his equality, and it's like one of his last gasps at showing how everyone's equal. And then he goes on, all of God's children, again, that connects with the God that I talked about a couple times, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics. So this sort of broadens his audience even further, and this is just the end of his actual speech, not just this passage. He shows how he cares for everyone, not just African Americans, and it's important because it shows his range and how he's open-minded and not being closed-minded, like it seems like the white people are being. Also, the free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. This is pathos, and it sort of finishes his thoughts. So in conclusion, he achieves his purpose mainly through repetition, strong diction, and pathos.